Alright, so we're going to take a look at Box Cutter in this video. Now this is an add-on that I use quite a bit, but I hardly ever talk about. I usually use it in my blockout phase as I'm creating my basic 3D shapes. And I'll take those and I'll subdivide them later on. But let's just get started here. So if you get this add-on, it's a paid add-on first of all, but it's really worth it. And once you install it, you're going to get this little icon here. And you can use this in object mode or edit mode. But if you turn it on, you'll get some little options up here. You can snap and you can use grid or dots. We're going to use grid for this one. Press the End key, bring out the side panel. You'll see there's a box cutter tab. It has a bunch of options in here. But most importantly, the help section is going to have a bunch of shortcuts and hotkeys you can use as you're using this. And as you work with it, you'll see that it updates over here. All right, and I'm going to delete the default cube by pressing X. I'm going to hold Alt while orbiting and jump into the side orthographic view for the X axis. All right, now I'm going to hit the D key. There's a couple different shapes we can create. Of course, your standard box, so I can click and drag and create a box like so. All right. But there's also going to be, actually, let's do this in 3D view real quick. So you can create boxes. I can switch over to cylinder or circle. Create cylinders. Hold shift, you can mouse wheel up and down to change the amount of edges. Okay. Delete those. And there's also an N-gon tool, which lets you, if I hold control and click, I can start to create some shapes like this if needed. Press E, I can now bring it up or down like that. Now these shapes, they have little handles in here that you can play with, so you can change the overall dimensions. You can bring it down, you can bring it up. There's also a bevel. Personally, I don't use the little bevel icon. Instead, I'll use B, shortcut B. You can also press Q to do this number, and mouse wheel up and down to create bevels if you need them. Okay. With all that in mind, let's go ahead and run through how I kind of use this thing real quick. I want to press D. I'm going to use the N-gon tool. And since there's nothing here, when I hold control and I click, I'm going to keep holding control. I can start to create a shape. Real quick and simple, like maybe something like that. Okay. I can press E. I'll orbit out, press E. Give it some depth. Now it's not aligned with the center point at the world origin. Just keep that in mind, but you can still work on this and it's quite useful. Now, if you don't have this object selected and you were to start clicking somewhere else, creating a shape, it's going to be gray. That means you're just creating a new shape. Okay. If you have an object selected and you hold control and you start clicking, you'll see it turns red, and that means you are doing a subtraction. You're using a cut. Okay, so it's a difference boolean operation that's taking place here. Okay, so you can press E and move it back and forth like so. You can press 3, 2, or 1 to do mirrors. Okay, keep that in mind. I'm going to do a 3 on this one. I could press B and do a bevel. That's something that's always possible, and I can mouse wheel up and down. But I'm not going to do that for this one. Okay. There's also other options like pressing W, so you could do wedges. You hit W again and just kind of toggle through them. You can also do a Shift T to do a taper, like that. Okay. We'll do a little bit of a taper here, why not? And kind of realign it a little bit. It's good to keep things tight, but you don't want to necessarily have them right on top of each other. So like these edges, when they're real close to each other, it could be a little bit of a problem. So just kind of work it so that sticks out a little bit or is on the inside a little bit. If it was on the inside, of course, it would do that though. All right. There's also ways to do arrays. So if you press V, you'll see we get the arrays going now. You define the axis by hitting the X, Y, or Z. Right? You see how that works out? So I can do mouse wheel up to create more and more arrays. That's something that you might want to consider. Hit V key again, we'll turn that off. For whatever reason it decided to move on me, but you can still move this. You can press G to move. You can hit S to scale and do things like that as well. You can also rotate. So if you wanted to rotate, it does snap by default, but you can hold shift and it won't snap anymore. So you can do numbers like that. Right. Okay, so that's just one type of cutter that you can use, which is the standard cut. If I press the D key and bring this back up, you'll see there's a number of different ones you can use. They all have shortcuts for the most part, but there's cuts, there's slice, there's intersects, there's insets and joins and knife tool, knife version. And there's an extract, which lets you create custom cutters, but we'll talk about that later. And then we got modal shortcut A, which is going to be create a new object. So even though I'm working on this object, if I do a normal shape, it's already set to cut. Right, I can press A instead, and I can create a new object. Right, so that'll be a new piece. When you do, let's not do that one there. Okay, when you do create a new cut, and you like what's going on, if you hold Shift and click, it's going to leave, Shift and click again, it's going to leave the cutter as active. So you'll see the wireframe for it. Now all of these shapes you're making are cutters, and by default, they're being used non-destructively. So you see here at the top, it says non-destructive. There's also a destructive method, which we'll take a look at in a second. But basically this base shape, if we go to the modifier panel, you'll see it's adding Boolean cuts, right? And so that's what's going on, is it's going to create booleans and booleans and booleans. But box cutter kind of automates that process because now everything's already parented and it moves around together as a group. And so, but you can always play with this kind of stuff and change it around. You can of course manually delete these, no problem. But let's say you're working on this object and you want to go into edit mode and continue to work on it. You'll see that we're selecting the base shape we came up with. So you need to apply the booleans and everything. Now box cutter has an easy way of doing this. I'm going to hit Alt W to re-enable it though. And that is this little down arrow up here. You can click on that. That's a smart apply. And what it does is it applies the Boolean operations. Sometimes it forgets to get rid of the cutters. So keep that in mind. Sometimes they might still be in there somewhere, kind of hidden away. You can always just press X and delete them. But if we go into edit mode now, we can work on this mesh and continue working on this mesh, right? So in edit mode, we can, let's go back into edit mode. We can turn on box cutter again. You might have to adjust some things, but you can use it destructively as well. So destructive works best in edit mode, in my opinion, if you're going to plan on using it this way. So if I want to do a box cut here, what ends up happening is as soon as I apply it, there's no modifiers, there's no cutters that are created. It's just permanent. It's done. Just keep that in mind. If I go back into, I'm going to turn it off in edit mode now. Go back into object mode, turn it back on. There we go. I toggle it on and off quite a bit. Okay, we're using ngon here. You'll see there's a Boolean operation still there. I know it shouldn't be, so I'm just going to delete it, but sometimes you'll have little leftovers. It does happen. Okay, so we're going to do some cuts. Let's get this going. So we could do a cut like this, perhaps. Cut inwards, hit E, there we go. We could do Shift T, do a taper. Okay. I'm not mirroring it right now, but I could by pressing 3. You can see how many little shortcuts you have here to use. So you can toggle through cutters or the cut modes by pressing X. Always try that as well. And I'm going to do a join here. You see, well, a join would be like a union operation. We're not going to do it right here. Bad idea, but go ahead and do it back here. We'll do a join back here. You can always change that grid size too by mouse wheeling up and down while holding control. So I'm going to bring this out, press J. If I hit Shift T, you'll see it tapers on the inside. Sometimes you can get away with going back the other way. So you can go E and then E again, hit Shift T and do that number. It doesn't always work though. So you might have to rescale your object or something. So if it doesn't work, for example, say it was permanently stuck backwards, you're still tapering, but you just taper out and then maybe press S and scale in a little bit or something like that. Okay, and so 3 to do the mirror, right? If I click now, this is going to do a join. So this will become one shape. I'm going to flatten it down. So you got rid of everything. So here we go. All right, so let's make a little cut from the side here. When you have something in the side view, this is usually when I do laser cuts. And a laser cut is very simple. Instead of defining the thickness by hitting the E key, you just do a double click and it does a cut all the way through the object. So if I wanted to do another one here, I could do that just like that, right? And of course, you can keep working the shape however you see fit. And you notice when I select this and I apply it, there we go, it's all cleaned up again. We can keep working on it if we wanted to. Now, I would block out my whole model first before I go to this next step. So I would make every little piece I want, make sure it looks exactly how I want, the right shapes and everything else. But I would keep it really low poly and just kind of blocky in general. But with just enough detail that the volume and the shape, I know what I'm going to need, right? Because I'm going to go into a subdivision workflow usually. Now, this is something that I do personally. Depending on your project, you may not need a subdivision surface workflow, but if I apply a sub D, you can see it's really messy, right? It just doesn't, looks like a fish or something, but it's not correct, right? So we have to work this manually and correct it all. And part of this correction, I want to make sure I press N, bring up item, this object, edit mode here. Oh, interesting. Okay, I'm gonna select it all real quick. Turn mean bevel weight down and mean bevel weight down there for vertices. Okay, just getting rid of those little blue lines. And more or less at this point, I can just go through and start changing things and correcting them the way I want, manually using a knife tool or doing insets or extrudes or whatever the case may be. And so if you followed along with my other videos, you'll know there's two different types of holding corners I talk about. And one of those being this corner here. Okay. I'm going to start cutting it out so you can see what's going on. This is what you'll more than likely be looking at for a corner like this. Okay. That's one type of corner you can create where it's 3 quads in the corner. You need 3 edges to hold a sharp edge, right? But then this one up here is going to be a little bit different. So I'm just going to cut it out into space here, but you need the 3 edges going up to hold that sharp, right? Now this one will end up going out that way, and this one will go that way, because this needs a corner holding here and holding here, and then you'll have another one coming through under here to hold the bottom side, right? A little messy on that one, but hit Control X, and you can do a quick dissolve. But you can see that this one here is the other type of holding corner. And if we run out the lines so it looks like actual proper geometry here, we can start to piece together our model piece by piece. Want that edge gone. There we go. So this would be that same type of corner on the opposite side. So that's a quad. That's quad, quad, quad. Okay, so just keep that in mind. It's these two types of holding corners, right? One that looks like that, and the other one which would look like what we had at the front there. You can see how this all starts to come together now. You'll have to go through your whole object and do this manually for the most part. But you'll start to see it all come together relatively quickly. So we'll just keep working on this one. I'm going to go a little bit more at speed now since I was explaining that part. But something you want to consider. Let's go down that way. All right. Fortunately, if we sat here while I did this all in real time, we'd be here for the next probably hour or so. So we're not going to finish this whole shape here, but we'll do a section of it at least. Sometimes you can get in a little weird predicaments, like this one here. I'm going to go ahead and just do this. You could do a M merge at last or at first or at distance or by center to clean these kind of things up as well. So, or G twice to slide them around. Merge by distance here. Select everything with A. Dissolve this edge. Well, I guess it can't. Not gonna let me yet. I want this to go all the way down. Usually it's better to hit your next section instead of trying to do those like mid cuts. Because that just gives you more work to do. But you see that's a quad, right? And this one probably needs a little bit of like extra padding on it. But I'm not real sure yet. So more than likely it will. That one would run that way. Run that way. That gives us a triangle. Not a big fan of triangles like that, so I'm gonna do this. Merge at last. I'm using machine tools to do the smart vert to do the merge at last. You're wondering what's going on there. Machine tools is a free add-on. You could, of course, pick that up at any time. Right. So this area is definitely not done yet, but it's getting there. And we should start to see some kind of results taking place. And because this doesn't have a edge holding here, you'll see that when it subdivides, it actually becomes a smooth shape like that. So there's a lot of stuff you can do within subdivision modeling as well to continue to further refine these basic block out shapes and then keep working them into something a little bit more than what you might have cut out originally. Right, I'm just going to cut across for these ones. That should be okay for now. But that's how that would go across the whole object. A lot of these by themselves in these areas, you need 3 edges to hold them. So you could always do a bevel, or you could do Control Shift R and hit E. You could try to do this. You can see two of them, a couple of them aren't working right now, so that's not actually a good idea. So a bevel here might work better. And let's do a bevel. Keeps doing that. When you do the bevel, you could change the shape to 1. All right. Just a heads up, I've ran into a bug with that as of late, where if I change it back to 0.5, Blender will actually crash on me for some reason. So it's kind of a weird situation, I guess, but Just want to point it out in case you run across that. So save your work, definitely. Now, this one here would need a holding edge on the top. So I'm not getting rid of that. It'd be something like that. This section as well would need holding edge here. Could run it out. Try going in different directions. We'll finish this little area and call it done here. At least for this video. You see where that's going now, right? Might want to take that one and send it this way. Right. This is going to get us to a point where we could start to work on this big area here. Cut across, cut down. That one would probably be a little better right there. Okay. All right. We can see that this one doesn't have anything holding it on the top, so we got to do that. Nothing down here. Nothing on this edge. So cutting things up manually is always going to be a really good teacher, because you'll start to see the patterns that take place. You'll start to understand them. A lot of this is reminiscent of being like loop cuts and things like that, right? Or insets. So you can say, yes, you can use loop cuts through this process as well. Or bevels or whatever. You can use everything you have. Kind of go through and start to hammer some of this stuff out. This one, of course, would get pretty hairy because we got this big cut in the middle as well. Got all this going on back here. So you got to figure out how to set your flow with your edges and what would work best for them. Because you'll probably get into this situation where everything becomes really piled up and dense. And you have to be a little bit of a critical thinker and kind of pre-plan your shapes and practice doing different shapes like this. Or hold them in position exactly how you want with the right flow and all that. So what you're doing, what a lot of people refer to this as is creating solves, right? I'm gonna push this above the subdivision. So I did a mirror axis at a Z, bisect Z, and I put it above the subdivision. So it's gonna show me kind of my end result here. I'm gonna turn it off in edit mode though. And so when you're creating a 3D shape and you're trying to figure out how to lay out the topology, all you're doing is solving it, trying to figure out what you could, how you can come up with a correct answer, basically, with the best type of edge flow and topology and even distribution of faces and things like that. So sometimes you can use things in that manner as well, where you pull them from all over and into the shape you need. I know, like this one here, I could cut here. As a result, should be able to merge them all right there, solve it. It should do pretty well on that edge. Not perfect, but pretty well. That little corner area. I got a double edge or double vert. That's what you can use that subdivision. See here. Merge it last. There you go. You can look at the subdivision result, see if you got issues popping up. A lot of times it points it out for you. It's a double edge or a double vert in here. That's all it is. The double vert. We'll move one, grab the other, hit with machine tools, do a smart vert or merge at last, basically. You see that one worked itself out. This one's still not good there. Okay. So it should be good now. Oh, still not good. Something going on down here. See, there's another vert in there. Try merging it again. Okay, it's starting to go the right way. Random vertex up there. All right. More than likely, that's only occurring because it needs places to go to hold that corner. It's not all flushed out yet. Just like this one, it's got a little crinkle to it because none of these are pulled out through yet. Okay, so with all that in mind, keep working your shape. Box cutter is pretty awesome because it gives you that ability to do this, right? And you're not stuck. If I apply that, I don't apply the subdivision, you're not stuck yet necessarily. You could still continue to use box cutter. Let's say you want to add a cylinder cut or something. You can always say like, maybe I need a screw hole here. You can always do that later on as well. In this situation, I wouldn't use that many edges, but right, collapse it. Let's do outset. So I'm going to press I to inset and then O to do the outset. Now when I do an inset, I press O to turn it back off. I can do regular inset. It's bottom edge. I can do Control Shift R, and then E. Do that number. When I subdivide this, it will go crazy again because it's not set up. Right, but then I'm going to need additional support loops to continue working with this how I see fit. Right, you might get away with some things like that that look pretty janky, but overall, there you go. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this video. You learned a little bit about box cutter. You learned a little bit about how you can do it as a blockout, and a little bit about how you can go through and subdivide or create a subdivision surface mesh out of those. Anyways, thanks for watching, and I'll check you out in the next one, all right? So take care.